So somebody requested that I make a tutorial, sort of, on all the steps to build this shell. And it's actually not that difficult. It's a little bit time consuming, but I'm going to do my best to try to cover every single base. Seems like people would just have like little bits and pieces that they're not sure what to do. And it's going to be a long video, but I'm going to go through every single step. The shell is a 6-inch shell, and it's a can shell, and it had 2 rows of inserts of 8. So there were 8 inserts on the bottom and 8 on the top. There were a ring of stars in the middle, and then I had a pistol of some glitter stars. This one that I'm going to make is going to be similar to that, but not exactly the same. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make all the inserts. I'm going to make 16 of them. So my case former is a piece of 1-inch PVC pipe. It's 1-inch PVC on the inside, so the outside diameter is roughly 1 5/16 inches. So that's what I'm going to use to make those. So I have here, this is very light craft paper. I think it's 30 or 40 pound virgin craft paper, and it was a big roll, but I cut it on a bandsaw and made a small roll specifically for this purpose. So depending on what craft paper you're using, you want to find a length of piece of paper that when you roll it around your former, that the paper that you're able to fold or pleat the end in one shot. You don't have to cut anything. So this light craft, I can take this and I could mash all the edges down like so. And I could get it fairly flat on the end, maybe twist it on the table. So I end up with something along those lines. So that's what I'm going to shoot for. So find out the length of paper that you might need to do that. Depending on the weight of your paper, it might be different for everyone. So I already know that for my weight of my craft paper to do this, I need a piece 20 inches long. So I'm going to measure out a piece 20 inches. So I've got this piece of paper. This is 5 3/4 wide. It's wider than it needs to be. It's just easier for me to work with a bigger piece of paper than a little tiny one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this up on my little form here, like so. And what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to pull this form down a little bit, just roughly a 1/2 inch, maybe a smidgen more. So when I could pleat these ends, I'm going to cut a disc to put in here first. And that could be, I found that it's not really critical what that is. So it could be like a piece of a cereal box, a piece of veneer, and actually that's what I'm going to use on here. It's just a piece of veneer. It's a wood on backer for like a cabinet shop would have this. So I just got to cut a plug, and I'm just going to trace this with a marker. And I'm going to cut this little circle out. And I'm going to cut, I want it to fit inside that roll of paper, so I'm going to cut it so that I'm actually cutting the marker off. So I get a little circle. So what I'm going to do, once I get this rolled up on here, I could push this down a little bit. And I'm going to take this little piece of veneer or cardboard or whatever I choose, and I'm going to stuff it down in there like so. I use PVA glue, which is a polyvinyl glue like wood glue or Elmer's glue. I'm just going to put a swirl in there. I'm going to fold this over. Just like that. I'm going to push this down. Get that nice and dense. So now I'm just going to cap this just to keep it together with that same paper that I just did that with. I'm going to cut a little circle. This one, I'm going to just cut. I'm going to leave the line on for the most part. So that's what I end up with. So now that I have this glued up, I'm going to take a little tiny bit of glue. Just run it down here with my finger. That'll hold that together. And I'm going to put some glue on here. I'm just going to mash it around with my finger. I'm going to take this piece of paper and stick it on the top. And that's it. That's going to be the first end of each insert. So while I have this on here, I have a hole drilled in here. What that's going to do is give me an option right now, while that paper is nice and wet, to punch a hole in it for my time fuse. So I'm just going to and I have this little punch here that I know it's going to leave me an absolute perfect 1/4 inch hole when I get it up to the shoulder. So I'm going to do this step 16 times. So that's what I've done. I have actually 17 insert cases here. So when these dry, this wood glue or PVA glue, it's going to dry pretty dang hard, and it will be fireproof just like this. Okay, now that I have these built, I need to put time fuse in them. I want to put the time fuse in now and then load them and then just put a plain piece of cardboard in the back, because the time fuse will be sticking out and it'd be hard to get that down inside such a tiny shell with stars in it. So I'm going to make the first set of inserts go off the time it takes for a piece of 5/8 fuse to burn. So I have my time fuse hole punch here, and you do not have to do it this way. You can just use a you could just dip the ends into like a BP slurry with some dextrin in it or something like that so it sticks, and then dip it in some granulated black powder. That works good too. I necessarily don't have the best luck with that for whatever reason, but since I am going to cross match mine, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to punch a hole in this time fuse. So that's what I got. Now I'm going to cut it 5/8 of an inch long from the end of the fuse I'll move my fence and do this more accurately, but just for the video I'm doing this. So from the very end of the fuse right here to the center of this hole is 5/8 of an inch. So I could take my can I could put this time fuse in here, like so. And then I'm going to take some PVA glue. I'm just going to put a bead right around its perimeter. And that'll soak down in there, and that'll dry hard as a stinking rock, and it'll be really fireproof. After you put the time fuse in, you need to think about how long you want the insert to finish out at. So I want mine to probably be roughly however long that is, maybe 1.5 inches long. So I want to know if I'm going to have it 1.5 inches long, I need enough paper so that I could pleat the other side. So that's roughly, I don't know, 9/16 or something that I need to have. So once I do that, I'm going to chop this off. And there will my insert be. So I'll have a time fuse in here already. And you could get something with a hole in it, whatever that might be. And you could set this down on it and the time fuse will go in the hole. Then you don't mash that around while you're packing them all. So before I load all these up, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut another disc out of some cereal box material or whatever, and then another piece of paper to plug the end. Now, the length of these inserts, I think that you don't want to get too long, but depending on the size of the stars that you're going to fit in there, I'm only going to use little 3/8 pumped stars that come out of a star plate. So I'm just going to put probably 5 stars in the bottom of this, a little bit of granulated powder, and then 5 more stars, and that's it. But if you were using bigger stars, you might want to think that through a little bit before you cut all these to length. Pack one first and make sure that you left yourself enough room. So here's my first row of inserts. There's 8 of them, and all their time fuse is 5/8 of an inch long from my cross matching hole. And at this point, I want to number these all with like a number 1, because the time fuses for the second row are not going to be all that much longer than this. So if you're going to, pack them differently, maybe, I think in this one I'm going to do 2 different colors in the inserts. So like the first row or group will be yellow, and maybe the second row will be green or something like that. I don't really know yet, but I'm just going to let these things dry until that glue is hard as a rock. So here are the stars, maybe not these specific color, but these are the stars that I'm going to use everywhere in the shell, the inserts and in the main braid. And it doesn't matter if you used cut or rolled or pumped or pressed or whatever you come up with to get a star. So I'm going to use these in the inserts because they're small, and I'll be able to fit a decent amount of them in there, maybe 8 or 10 or something like that. But if you use like a 1/2 inch star, you might only fit 6 or 8. So these have a decent burn rate, but this whole shell is going to have 3/8 stars, and you could really use whatever you want. It doesn't. You could use big giant stars in the main break, or you could use a whole bunch of 1/4 inch stars. It just depends on how long you want everything to burn out. So I ended up marking my first row with an X, and it's pretty big so that I could see it through the spiking. And then here's the fuses for my second row, and this is 7/8 long, and these are 5/8, so it's just a 1/4 inch longer. So it'll just be a very short period of time before the second row goes off. And then there is row 2 with the 7/8 time fuse. So I have all my little cans and I cut them to length and I cut a little stick. This is going to be the finished length that I want my insert to be when it's closed up. So for the first row, which is row X, I decided I'm going to use, this is like a chartreuse looking yellow, I guess you could call it. And I'm just going to put a dozen stars in there total. So I got 6. I'm just going to drop them down in here. And they all actually sit in there perfect. So after I put those in there, I'm going to take some granulated BP in there. And I want these to be really tight. So that's one thing I found with the inserts. You don't want there to be voids in there because the casing's not that substantial. And if you have voids in there, when the shell breaks, it's under so much pressure, you can actually collapse the insert and crack the casing. And then if any fire gets in there, it's just going to break at the main break. Then I'm going to take 1 gram. This is just a 70-30 poppy powder. Drop that in there. And then I'll just dump a little more. I'm going to grab 6 more stars. Those in there like so. Now I have this little stick here so I could kind of see how full I am. I'm going to fill the rest of this up with some granulated. Make sure that's consolidated in there real nice. That's nice and tight. So just as before, I've got my piece of cardboard or whatever you're going to use. It's going to go on the inside here. Put some PVA in there. That's nice and rigid. So when you squeeze it, it doesn't move around at all. Now I wrapped some masking tape around here, and it's just one last little fireproofing since the casing's not real heavy. It also helps with spiking because it wants to dig into the tape. Because I'm gonna tug on this time fuse really hard when I'm spiking this. I'm gonna really squeeze it down. And that sometimes helps it stay where you want. So I forgot to hit the record button when I was going to video spiking this. You could see how tight that I'm pulling on this. I had to cut it off because I'm going to do it again and film it. You could see how hard that string's pushing into this. That's like how hard and tight you're making this string. So I'm going to re-spike this one, and you could do like a clove hitch, or you could just do a regular through the hoop and then through the hoop again, and just pull that on there pretty tight. Cut some of the excess off. And as far as string goes, I bought this string years ago, and I don't even remember where I got it or what it is, but it's super strong. Like, you cannot break this with your hands unless you have gloves on. But I know a lot of people use just like a cotton string that I guess works pretty well too. This is just what I happen to have. So I just tied the string on here, and I'm going to pull pretty hard on this time fuse at first. And what I want to do is I want it to be so that I'm rolling this direction, not this direction. So I'm going to grab this right here, find a spot. You know what, I'll do the same grooves as before. I'm going to pull this pretty tight. Just going to roll this. Then when I get to the time fuse, I'm going to try to get around the time fuse, but then back into the center so that I cross over like across right in the other side. And as I'm doing this, I'm really pulling this tight. It's really digging the string in. Then back to the time fuse and twist it around until I get to in between the other one, just like so. And filming this, it's kind of a pain in the ass, but this is actually a very quick thing. I could do one of these in probably 20 seconds. Then once I get all the way through, I'm going to go around the time fuse a little bit, and then right when I get to the next string, put my thumb on it, give it a little tug, and I'm just going to roll this around. And that'll hook in there. And once I get on the side like this, I'm really pulling hard. This is really consolidating, and I'm going to roll this around until I can cross over that string. Then I'm going to, I can get some more string out here. So then I'm going to difficult to do when you're filming. I'm going to roll this up until I, again, cross over the other string. So now I'm on the other side. I'm just going to hold this here. I'm just going to get this string, bring it around. I'm going to really pull on this, get that cinch down hard. Cut off the excess. I'm going to take a little plop of glue just to make sure that doesn't unravel. That. There we go. This little sucker's hard as rock. So now that my inserts are all spiked, I have them all done. And surprisingly, it didn't take that long. Once you get like going on one and you kind of think ahead, you could mash through them pretty quick, especially loading them. Like I probably loaded all of them in realistically maybe 25 minutes. I don't know. But anyway, so because I'm cross matching, I have to stick fuse in this little hole, and my time fuse punch, it has 3 different sizes, so I could punch different size holes in there. So sometimes, like if I decide that I'm going to make some black match and I'm going to use my own, sometimes it comes out heavier or thicker depending on the string that I use. So that's the reason why this has different. So the largest hole in my punch is what I used on here, and that is perfect for 2 pieces. This is actually a commercial thing that I kind of dissected because I don't really like making black match. So if I stagger these a smidge, I could take these and push them right through the hole. And that's it. All my finished inserts, and they are very close to being all exactly the same. So I made 17 of those inserts, and so it's an extra one, and I don't have a gun this small, so I found this tube. It's from like a sheet of plastic was rolled up on it, and it kind of fits tight in there, but I'm going to try to shoot this out of there just like a regular 1.5-inch shell. I ended up just drilling a hole in the side of this thing, throwing a piece of Visco in it, and I'm going to measure out 2 grams we'll do now. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build the main shell casing that all those inserts are going to go into. I made a case former, but I did it because it's easier, but you do not have to have something like this to do this. I actually think the first one, or that one in the video that I made, I used a container from like some kind of cleaning product. This is exactly like 5 3/8. If you find a bottle that's very close to about that size, then you could just use that to form your paper. So for this shell casing, just like the inserts, I'm going to roll that same thin craft paper. I think it's 40 pound. And I'm going to put 9 layers. So I'm just going to cut a strip of paper long enough till I could wrap it around and get 9 full layers. Just exactly like the insert. And for the end, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut 3 discs out of some kind of cardboard. This is actually a Cheerio box. So I'm going to have 3 layers of that. So then I ended up, this was all sticking up. I went through there with a pair of scissors and I cut all these. And then I put glue under there. I'm just going to push all these down. Then I'm going to take some more PVA. I'm going to try to get better coverage this time. So in the middle. And when this PVA glue dries, it kind of soaks into the paper and it gets really strong. I'm going to take the cardboard. Put that on top there. This one I'm going to thin it out with my finger. I want to get all coverage. Probably a little bit too much. I'm going to take my 3rd piece of cardboard. I'm going to stick it on top. Now I'm going to just stick a 10-pound weight on here. That right there, I'll just let that dry till tomorrow. And when that dries, you'll have 3 plies of cardboard, and it'll be really strong. So now my main can's done. I can pull this off of here. That's what it looks like. So I just wanted to check for fitment real quick. So after I spiked all these, they do get a little bit bigger, but sometimes, and this would probably vary for everybody, it's sometimes these are hard to get in there and it's like there's not enough room for them. When I'm trying to get them in there with the spiking catches on each other and you like can't get them to fit. If that were the case, you could wrap them in one layer of craft paper, just with a piece of tape, so that they could slide. Or in this case right now, they were just a little bit too small. So I just cut some regular cardboard and I put a space, I stuffed it between every single one. So what I want is all these to be pressed up against the outside. And I want them to be tight in there to a point where I could flip this over and they won't fall out. I'm going to try to divide up the ring of stars in the main break. And I just basically made a tissue paper ring and then hot glued some little dividers on it. So in these little openings, I'm going to put, I don't know, 10 or so silver stars that leave a nice tail. They leave a nice long tail. And then in here, I'm going to put a blue star. It's like a lighter blue, has a little bit of metal in it, so it just burns bright. So to try to get these to break in quadrants, so like the stars that are in this cluster, the intention is to get them to go out like this, and then the silver ones in this are going to go out like this, so it kind of leave like a pattern. We'll see how that goes. So I put my first row in. What I ended up doing, I have black powder on Rice Krispie cereal. This is just so it takes up more room. If you just put like granulated powder in there, it would use a whole bunch. Sometimes people will do this on rice hulls or rice puffs or Rice Krispies, or maybe even grass seed. I think some people do. And that's it. So once I get to this, I'm ready to put my ring of stars around the perimeter. So I kind of put this thing in here just to keep it separated a little bit, and I ended up putting some more BP here in the center. And I'm going to take a little bit of tissue paper and wrap up 5 grams of 70-30 and just paste it, or just plop it right there in the center. So what I did is I took silver, and in each one of those little quadrants there, I put 5 of these stars that are silver that leave a silver tail. These stars, they're real tiny. This, I'm going to try to consolidate right in the center a little glittery, flashy pistol that kind of stays in the middle of the shell. I dropped a little cannula in here with a piece of tissue paper wrapped around the bottom. I'm going to drop my Wincor 20 stars in there. Then I went and put in these bigger quadrants all my blue stars. And I'm going to fill flush with the top of that with some BP on Rice Krispies, and then I'll put my second row of inserts in. Now you can kind of see how I have that all leveled off. There's the second row. I'm just going to fill this rest of the way up with BP. So this part here that I'm going to do, this is not necessary. It's just something I do because it makes it easier for me. But that disc that I made for the top, where the time fuse is going to go into for the main break, I'm going to drill a hole in here, right in the center. And I'm going to take a little tube that has a 1/4 inch ID for my time fuse to go in here. And I'm going to glue this in here. The reason why I want to do that is because I don't want it to be in there when I'm spiking and if I do any pasting, and I just don't want to bang it around. But you could put your time fuse right in here and then that part would be done. And then I'm also going to glue this on here. And this, I'm going to use it to help me to spike it. So I have something that I could put, tie my string to start spiking. And then my rising effect, I'm actually going to stick it down in between these two. So, but then again, you don't have to do this stuff. That's just what I do. And that's what that looks like. So now I just put that thing in there, and I'm gonna fold this up with some glue, just like I did the other side. I think because I was videoing, this thing right here that I normally put on there, I was supposed to put that on last, so I had to go and cut holes through my end discs. So I glued those discs on with some PVA glue, and I'm just gonna let that dry. So what I did here is I just used some IPG flat back tape. It's a paper tape, and it has adhesive on it already. You don't have to wet it. And I just did one layer of pasting on here with that, and it's just to keep the moisture out, because it's probably gonna, this type of weather we're having, it's not gonna dry real quick, and I don't want it all soak into the shell. This is that IPG tape. It's paper, but it's got a coating on it. It doesn't let water go through. So I've got some wheat paste here, and I have these little NyQuil cups, I think they're from. I filled 2 of these, and then with 1 cup of water, just run it through like the household blender. It ends up looking something like that. I cut 5 pieces of craft paper, big enough to go all the way around here and overlap like this far. I cut 5 pieces. It's the same paper that I made the shell out of initially. And I'm going to paste these on both sides and then just wrap them around one by one. So here it is after those 5 layers. I cut 1 disc on the bottom to cover up the pleating just so it looks pretty. And then when this dries, maybe like a couple days, depending on the weather, and then I'll just have to fit it in the mortar and see if it's big enough. If it's not, then I'll just dry wrap it until it is big enough. I have an MDF disc that's ever so slightly bigger than my finished shell. It's 1/4 inch thick. This is just to protect it from the lift charge a little bit. I'm going to use 100 grams of lift powder. It's going to be pretty violent, and this shell is pretty heavy, and it's going to go from a complete standstill to really fast in a very short period of time. So I'm just going to put this on here to help protect it. I'm just going to use hot glue. There we go. Now I'm going to check this in the mortar and see how much play there is. Looks like maybe, I don't know, it might even be a 1/4 inch all the way around, maybe 3/16. So I'm going to now dry wrap this until I get it up to the size that I need. Because the shell was pretty small, I just put a heavy dry wrap on it. I don't know how many layers it is exactly, but it's pretty heavy. On my time fuse for the main brake, I'm going to use 1 1/4 inch fuse. So from that hole to here is 1 1/4 inch. And then I put another hole up here, and I'm just going to cross match it twice, and that's just to be sure, but it's probably totally unnecessary. Now, that's a 3-inch long little tube, so I'm going to stick some black match down in that hole before I put my time fuse in there. And then I'm just going to PVA glue the time fuse in. Now I have this little skinny Ziploc bag, and I'm going to measure out 100 grams of lift powder and put it in this bag. Try to get a cup on there. It's 40. 40. There. I'm going to take a quick match leader, stick it down in here. Just going to tie this on here with a piece of string. I'm going to take this bag. I have problems with moisture. Just about everything. So I'm going to fold this over. So there will be my lift bag. I'm just going to take some masking tape. Just going to tape this to the bottom. And I just stripped away a little bit of the outside. I'm going to attach that right to my time fuse. There we go, that's all attached. Now I'm just going to do one little layer of wrap just to make it look prettier. And that's it. In just a second, it will be all over. All I got to do, I'm just going to attach a piece of Visco onto here.